Brad Trevino lounged on the sofa, his gaze fixed on his phone following a troubling call from his wife, Stacy. That morning, his private investigator had informed him that Stacy and her lover were heading to Honolulu for a week, despite her telling him otherwise. This was just the latest in a series of deceptions. He was stunned by his own naivety. After nearly 10 years of building a life with Stacy, it all seemed to be unraveling. He took a sip of coffee and closed his eyes, reflecting on their past. Brad met Stacy in college while pursuing business degrees. Their relationship deepened, leading to marriage after graduation. He worked for his father's successful tire store chain, starting with summer jobs and eventually joining the corporate headquarters in accounting. His father planned to pass the company on to him, with Brad expected to succeed Mike Allen, the CFO, when he retired. Stacy became a successful realtor after obtaining her license post-marriage. They had built a comfortable life together, buying a nice house in the suburbs and driving new cars. From the outside, their marriage seemed solid, though they didn't have kids, which bothered Brad more than Stacy. Now, he saw it as a bit of a blessing. Early on, Stacy said her tubes were problematic, so she had them tied. He comforted her and suggested adoption, but Stacy wasn't interested. Eventually, he came to terms with the idea that they wouldn't have children. Over the past year, though, he noticed some changes that made him suspect something was wrong, something that could change their relationship forever. For one, Stacy started spending more time out with her friends than usual. He didn't mind her having a break since he knew her job was stressful. But what used to be a bi-weekly happy hour that ended by 7 p.m. turned into a 2 or 3 night a week event. Sometimes she didn't come home until midnight or later. Brad wasn't happy about it and voiced his concerns, but she brushed him off, saying she was stressed at work and needed time to unwind. One night, when she came home with disheveled hair and clothes smelling of cigarette smoke, he asked, "So, what are you doing until midnight?" "Oh, we just had a few drinks," she replied. "Sometimes we dance if we feel like it." "Look, Brad, it's none of your business. I'm an adult and don't need you telling me what to do. So back off, okay?" Brad stared at her in disbelief. She had never talked to him like that before. Seeing his reaction, she tried to soften her tone. "I'm sorry, Brad," she said. "I didn't mean to snap at you. It's just that the market pressures are really getting to us." "You've handled tough market situations before without it bothering you," he said. "What's different now?" "You don't understand how hard it can be," she replied. "The competition is getting tougher, and the bosses are pushing us harder to close deals." "I get that, dear," he told her, "but you shouldn't take it out on me. I'm on your side, remember?" She smiled and hugged him. "You're right, honey," she said. "I'm sorry." "Okay, I accept your apology," he said. "But please go take a shower or something. No offense, but you smell like smoke." "Sorry about that," she said. "There was a lot of smoking at the club. I'll go shower now." He lay down and was already asleep by the time she came to bed. In the following months, other issues surfaced. Their bed life decreased significantly. They used to be intimate 3 or 4 times a week, but it dropped to twice a week, and eventually to about once every 2 weeks, if he was lucky. Her attitude also seemed to shift. She used to show interest in his work and hobbies, but now she seemed indifferent. Then one day, he caught her in a blatant lie. One day, he decided to surprise her with a lunch visit at her office. However, when he arrived, he was told she was out showing property. That night, after Stacy returned from her evening with the girls, he asked her about her day. "I was at the office all day today," she said. "I had a lot of paperwork to finish, so I just got a sandwich from the vending machine." Brad was stunned. She had lied to him without a hint of hesitation. As far as he knew, this was the first time she'd ever done that. He thought about confronting her, but decided against it. Given her current mood, she might overreact, and he was too exhausted to handle that. He started to wonder how many other times she had been dishonest with him. Later that night, as they lay in bed, he turned to look at her. She noticed his worried expression. "What's wrong, Brad?" she asked. "I'm worried," he said. "Worried about what?" she asked. "About us," he said. "I feel like we're growing apart. Do you still love me?" "Of course I do, honey," she said, putting her arm around him. "You know that, don't you?" "Honestly, I'm not sure," he said. "I can't remember the last time you said it. And we haven't been intimate in a while. It feels like you're away more than you're home." "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just the job pressure. I do love you. Please believe me." "Can you show it a bit more?" he asked. "Of course, baby," she said, giving him a kiss. They made love that night, and Brad felt a bit better, but he still had doubts. Things seemed to go back to normal for a month. But then the same issues started again. What is going on? He wondered yet again. He began to get an idea of what was happening the day his old friend, Ron Green, called him, asking if they could meet up. Sure, I can grab a beer with you, Brad said. What's up? I can't explain over the phone, Brad, Ron said. But it's important. Okay, Brad said. I'll meet you there at 5:30 if that works for you. Brad met Ron at the bar that evening, not too concerned about being late since Stacy was usually out until 6 or 7 p.m., sometimes later. All right, buddy, Brad said as they enjoyed their beers. Tell me what's going on. Brad, Ron started, I saw your wife today while I was out running errands. Yeah? Brad responded. She's a real estate agent, so she was probably out showing properties. I'm sure that's true, Ron said. But I didn't realize real estate involved kissing and holding hands. What? Brad asked, surprised. You're kidding, right? I wish I was, Ron said. I was driving down Riverside Drive and saw your wife leaving a house with some guy. They were holding hands and kissing. And it wasn't just a quick peck. He had his hands all over her. That can't be right, Brad said. Are you sure it was my Stacy? Ron pulled out his phone and showed Brad a picture. It clearly showed Stacy kissing a man with his hands on her backside. Wow, Brad said quietly as he handed back the phone. Can you email me that picture? Sure, Ron said, tapping on his phone. What are you going to do about this? I'm not sure, Brad said, shaking his head. Things have been off for a while, but I never thought she'd do something like this. A friend of mine is a private investigator, Ron offered. I can connect you with him if you want. Please do, Brad said. I need to find out what's really going on. They said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. When Brad got home, Stacy was in the kitchen. This was unusual, he thought. Home early, huh? He said, giving her a kiss. Not that I'm complaining. She smiled and kissed him back. Where were you? She asked. I was out having a beer with Ron, he said. I didn't expect you home so soon, so I thought I'd stop by the bar. Everything okay with your friend? She asked. Not really, Brad said. He found out that the wife of one of his friends is cheating on her husband. Oh? She said, looking interested. Yeah, Brad continued. He saw her kissing and holding hands with another guy today. He thought he noticed her flinch slightly. Well, she said, maybe he's misinterpreting things. I don't know, Brad said. I'm just relieved I don't have that issue. He noticed she seemed to flinch slightly at his comment. It would really hurt me if you ever did something like that. I would never do anything like that to you, she said, hugging him. I love you way too much. That's good to hear, he said, kissing her gently. So, what's the reason for you being home so early? With our company convention coming up this weekend, I thought I'd start packing, she explained. I also wanted to spend a couple of nights with you before we're apart for a few days. It's in Las Vegas this year. Where's it being held? He asked. At the convention center, she replied. We're staying at the Westgate Resort. I've heard it's a 4-star place. So when do you leave? He asked. Friday afternoon, right after lunch, she said. That's the day after tomorrow. Are you getting another award this year? He asked. She usually won awards for being the top seller in the region. Probably, she said, and they shared another kiss. Well then, he said, how about I take you upstairs and celebrate your successful year? She smiled and took his hand. I was hoping you'd ask, she said. They spent the evening making love, but Brad couldn't shake his concerns. He wondered if she might cheat on him over the weekend. I've got some vacation time coming up, he said. How about I join you? We could spend the week in Vegas, relax, and reconnect. Our 10th anniversary is next week, remember? That sounds nice, she said. But I'll be so busy with seminars and meetings that we'd barely see each other. Plus, they expect me to jump right back into work after the convention. Let's celebrate our anniversary when I get back. I'll make it up to you, I promise. All right, he said. I'll hold you to that. The next day, Brad reached out to Ron and got the contact information for the private investigator. He set up a meeting for that day and drove over before lunchtime. Good morning, Mr. Trevino, the middle-aged man greeted him as Brad walked into his messy office. Nice to meet you. Ron mentioned you might be coming by. Just call me Jerry. How can I help you? Brad described what was going on and mentioned Stacy's upcoming trip to Las Vegas. Vegas, huh? Jerry said. Do you think she's planning to meet someone at the convention? I'm not sure, Brad replied. It's possible. Well, I have some contacts there who owe me a few favors, Jerry said. Here's the plan. We'll keep an eye on her. And if you want, we can even set up a camera and a microphone if you give me her room number. It'll cost more, though. I figured as much, Brad said. But I need to know the truth. Jerry handed him a digital audio recorder. This is pretty easy to use, Jerry said. It's voice activated, so just put it under her car seat and turn it on. You can get it later after she's gone. I'm assuming she'll leave her car at the airport." "She usually does," Brad said. "Great," Jerry said. "We've got this under control. If she's cheating, we'll find out. Here's my private number in case you hear anything. Feel free to call anytime." "Thanks," Brad said, writing a check from his personal account instead of their joint account. Both he and Stacy had separate personal accounts, aside from their joint checking account, which was used for bills. They had agreed years ago to keep their personal finances separate, each contributing no more than 10% of their earnings to the joint account. Until now, Brad had used his account for clothes, small expenses, and gifts for Stacy. He had been saving for a cruise, but now he was using it for this situation. That evening, Stacy finished getting ready for her trip. Brad offered to help her with the bags, which she was happy to accept. "That would really help," she said with a kiss. He loaded the bags into the trunk of her car, noticing she had packed quite a lot. It seemed like way more than she'd need for just a weekend. Curiosity got the better of him, so he peeked into her bag. He immediately noticed her birth control pills, only 10 left in the container. He wondered why she still had them, since she had supposedly had her tubes tied. Was that another lie? As he looked through her clothes, he saw that while some were suitable for business, a lot of it was clearly meant for nightlife. Tiny dresses and lacy underwear he hadn't seen before. There were also a couple of very revealing swimwear, including one that looked like a micro bikini with a zipper. What the heck were those meetings? He thought. He quickly snapped some photos with his phone. He then opened her car door, slipped the audio recorder under her seat, and made sure it was turned on. After locking the car, they spent the night together. Brad wondered if this might be the last time they would be intimate as husband and wife. The next morning at breakfast, Stacy gave him her room number and promised to call each night. "I love you," she said, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "I love you too," he replied. He watched her drive off before heading to work. Once there, he called Jerry and gave him the room number. "Great," Jerry responded. "Thanks. I'll have my team start working on it right away." Later that afternoon, Stacy called to let him know she was at the airport and about to board her flight. "I'll call you once I'm checked into my room," she said. "I'd appreciate that," he said. "Remember, I love you." "I love you too, babe," she said. "I'll miss you." "Yeah, right, you lying jerk," he thought sarcastically. "I miss you too," he said instead. As he ended the call, he noticed his father standing in the doorway. "Everything okay, son?" his father asked. "You look like something's wrong." "I'm not sure, Dad," Brad replied. His father came into the office and shut the door. "Everything all right at home? Want to talk about it?" his father asked. Knowing he couldn't hide anything from his father, Brad explained everything he knew. "That doesn't sound good, son," his father said. "I wouldn't have guessed she'd cheat on you." "Neither would I, Dad," Brad admitted. "Well, if there's anything your mom or I can do, just let us know," his father offered. "We're here for you." "Thanks, Dad," Brad said. "I really appreciate it." Brad left work a bit early, drove to the airport, and found Stacy's car in the short-term parking lot. He took out the audio recorder and noticed the car was spotless, just as she always kept it. On the drive home, Brad received a call from Stacy. "Hi, babe," she said. "Just wanted to let you know I made it here safely." "Thanks for letting me know," he replied. "I'm just getting settled in," she continued. "I'll give you a call later tonight. Love you." "Love you too," he said. Once he got home, he turned on the audio recorder, hoping there would be nothing unusual. For the most part, it was just road noise and the sound of her radio. But about halfway through, things took a turn. He heard her phone ring. Since it was connected via Bluetooth to her car's speakers, he could hear both sides of the conversation. "Hey, baby," a man's voice said. "Hey there, stud muffin," Stacy replied. Stud muffin? Brad thought. Who the hell is this guy? "I can't wait to see you again," the man said. "Last week was amazing." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," Stacy said with a playful giggle. "Are we still on for next week?" "Next week?" Brad was stunned. "All set," the man said. "Did you tell your husband yet?" "Not yet," she said. "Don't worry, sweetie, I've got it covered. He doesn't have any clue, does he?" the man asked. "Not a clue," she said. "He's as oblivious as ever." "I hope you're right," he said. "I told you not to worry," she assured him. "He'll believe whatever I say." "Good," the man responded. "Listen, I'm about to pull into the airport," she said. "I'll see you at the hotel tonight, okay?" "Can't wait," he said. "Bye, lover." "Bye-bye," she said, ending the call. Brad stared at the recorder in shock. He replayed the conversation to make sure he wasn't misinterpreting anything. Not only was she cheating on him, but she also had plans for next week, the week of their 10th anniversary, that didn't involve him. Damn, damn, he thought. How long has this been going on? And who the hell is this jerk she's seeing? He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at his desk, replaying the past few months in his mind. Had he really been so oblivious that he missed all the warning signs? He began to question what else she might be hiding. Until now, he had always respected her privacy and avoided snooping through her personal stuff. But that was no longer an option. He knew her home desk was locked, but also where she kept the key. He went to their bedroom, opened a small drawer in her jewelry box, and found the key on a ring with a few others. Taking the ring, he headed to the room they had set up as her office. He unlocked the desk and began sifting through her files. Normally, he would never invade her privacy like this, but her betrayal had changed everything. What he uncovered was shocking. It seemed Stacy had been deceiving him throughout their entire marriage. He found a folder with her banking records and was stunned by how much she had saved from her salary. He knew how much she put into their joint account and was floored to discover she had stashed away far more than the agreed 10% in her private account, which now held over $250,000. Checking her recent purchases, he saw she had bought an extremely pricey Rolex watch for a man, along with other high-end gifts, clearly for her lover, since she had never given him anything so extravagant. She had also splurged on a lot of expensive clothing online, including some risque items from Victoria's Secret, none of which he had ever seen. But there was even more. He came across medical bills from a family planning clinic. It looked like she had managed to get pregnant twice in the past 2 years and had abortions each time, paying in cash from her own account. He wondered if one or both of those pregnancies were actually his. He also noticed that Stacy had been regularly paying for birth control pills for at least the past 4 years. Even worse, he found a receipt for Plan B morning after pills. The date on the receipt showed she had bought them earlier this week. But there was more. Among her receipts was a recent one for a large down payment on a condo in an upscale area of town. Was this going to be her secret getaway, he wondered, or part of her plan to leave the marriage? There were also receipts for utilities and new furniture. He looked at the key ring he had found earlier and wondered if one of the keys was for her new condo. He planned to find out. He turned on her computer to see if he could find any more clues. Knowing she always wrote her passwords down, he found a note taped to the bottom of her keyboard with a list of usernames and passwords. He tried the first one, and it worked. Opening her browser, he found a link to her online email account and accessed it. It was clear she had saved the username and password on the system, because he got right into her inbox. He started going through her emails and was stunned by what he discovered. There were several emails between her and someone named Greg Wilson. Most of them were explicit, with Greg talking about how much he enjoyed having closeness with Stacy. Her replies were just as suggestive. The emails went back nearly a year, around the time he first noticed changes in her behavior. From what he gathered, their meetings initially happened in hotel rooms, but they later started meeting at homes she was selling. He found an email from about 6 months ago that answered one of his questions. "Did you deal with that issue?" Greg asked. "Yes," Stacy replied. "I went to get the abortion today." "It's a shame you didn't keep it," Greg said. "You could have passed it off as Brad's." "I couldn't do that," Stacy said. "He thinks I can't have kids. He'd know it wasn't his." Brad realized that was around the time he first noticed her lying. The nerve of her, he thought angrily. The deceitful, scheming, cheating hoe. He kept going through the emails. At one point, Greg suggested having closeness in Stacy's marital bed, but she refused. "I'm not doing that to Brad," she told him in an email. "Come on," Greg responded. "The dumb jerk doesn't have a clue." "No," she replied. "I'm not doing it." "What if you had your own place?" Greg suggested. "You could buy a nice condo with your commissions and Brad would never know." "That might work," she answered. "I have my own account and Brad never questions it. I'll check what's available." That email was from 3 months ago. The receipt for the condo down payment was from just over a month ago. "I got the condo," she told him in an email. "I made the down payment and new furniture is coming in about a week. Brad doesn't have a clue." "Perfect," Greg replied. "We'll need to break in every room." Brad was stunned by this. He kept reading through the emails. "Why are you still with your husband?" Greg asked. "Why not just leave him and move into the condo?" "Believe it or not, I still care about him," Stacy said. "He might be a boring accountant for a tire store chain, but he's good to me. I only got the condo so we'd have a private spot to meet without risking a hotel visit. Besides, you're still married." "Just say the word and I'll dump Christy right away," Greg replied. "She's a real pain anyway." "Let's see how things go after the conference," she answered. After the conference? What's supposed to happen after the conference? Brad wondered. He started printing her emails and copying the receipts when the phone rang. Stacy's name popped up on the screen. "Hello?" he answered. "It's me," Stacy said. "Are you okay? You sound off." "I've got a terrible headache," he said, trying to keep his suspicions hidden. "Well, I'm just settling in for the night," she said. "Take something for that headache and try to get some rest." "I love you and miss you," she added. "Yeah, me too," he said. "Goodbye." He ended the call, thinking about how he hadn't said he loved or missed her directly. The truth was he was on the edge of punching a hole in the wall. He decided to find out who this Greg guy was, so he started searching the website for Stacy's company. Sure enough, he found him. Greg Wilson was listed as the regional manager for the real estate company where Stacy worked, so she was sleeping with her boss. He printed out the page and added it to his pile of documents. Restless, Brad decided to check Stacy's condo. After confirming the address and finding an alarm code in her paperwork, he shut down her computer, grabbed latex gloves from the garage, and headed out. At the condo, he used a key from her jewelry box to enter. He disabled the alarm with the code from her paperwork and turned on some lights. Impressed by her stylish decor, he noted the absence of personal photos. Clearly, this was her private retreat from their marriage. In the kitchen, he found few dishes and an almost empty refrigerator. The condo was well furnished, with elegant floral prints and a large flat-screen TV. The master bedroom also had lacy curtains, a favorite of Stacy's, hanging over an electric heater, which he thought was a fire risk. While searching, he discovered lingerie he hadn't seen before, men's underwear he presumed belonged to Greg, and various toys, including several large Johnsons. He took photos with his phone and found a card from Greg in the nightstand drawer addressed to Stacy. The card said, "Just wanted to say thanks for the watch. Can't wait for your housewarming," and was signed, "Love, Greg." He felt a surge of anger, imagining ripping Greg's arm off and using it to hit his cheating wife. In the walk-in closet, he discovered even more clothes, both men's and women's, on hangers. In the master bathroom, he saw 2 toothbrushes by the sink and matching his and hers towels on the rack next to the shower. He took more pictures with his phone. The second bedroom had just a small desk and a chair. A network cable was lying on the desk, suggesting it was used for her laptop. A few pieces of mail addressed to her were on the table, all from utility companies. He took photos of them, making sure her name and address were clear in the shots. The windows in this room were also covered with long, lacy curtains that fell right in front of an electric baseboard heater. Looking around, he spotted a few other potential fire hazards. There were no smoke detectors in the bedrooms, and the one in the kitchen ceiling looked very old. He wondered if it even had a working battery. He made sure everything was exactly as it was when he arrived. He turned off all the lights, set the security system back up, and locked the door before leaving. He got back to his car and drove home, thinking through his next steps. Divorce seemed like the obvious choice to him. Even if she sold the condo and ended things with her lover, he could never trust her again. He knew from her financial records that she earned a lot more than he did, so he hoped that would help him avoid paying alimony. He decided to wait until he could consult with a lawyer before making any moves. He also hoped that since she bought the condo in her own name, he wouldn't have to give her the house or sell it and split the proceeds. To him, buying the condo without telling him was like abandoning their marriage. They didn't have any kids, so child support and custody weren't issues. He wanted to make sure both cheaters faced consequences for what they did. He knew violence was not an option since he didn't want to end up in jail. Once he got home, he searched the phone book and found a listing for Gregory Wilson. Hoping it was the right person, he called the number. "Wilson Residence," answered a woman's voice. "Is this Mrs. Wilson?" he asked. "Yes, it is," she replied. "Who am I speaking with?" "This is Brad Trevino. Is your husband the regional manager for Acme Real Estate?" Brad asked. "Yes, he is," the woman said. "But he's at a conference this weekend and will be out next week visiting other offices. You should call the regional office to leave a message for him." "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, I need to speak with you," Brad said. "Oh?" she responded. "Yes, ma'am," Brad said. "I'm sorry to say this, but my wife is having an affair with your husband." "Are you certain about this?" she asked. "Yes, I am," Brad said, "and I can prove it." "Do you have solid proof?" she asked. "I can even show you where they meet if you want," Brad said. He heard her sigh on the other end of the line. "Would tomorrow work?" she asked. "Sure," Brad replied. "What time is good for you?" "About 1 o'clock in the afternoon," she said. He gave her the address and directions to Stacy's condo. "I'll see you then," Brad said, ending the call. He smiled and went to his desk to start a to-do list. The first thing he planned was to change the locks on the doors. He could finish that before meeting Greg's wife at Stacy's condo. He thought about getting drunk that night, but decided against it. Instead, he grabbed a slice of cold pizza and ate it while weighing his options. After finishing the pizza, he trudged upstairs to bed. He got up early the next morning and went to a local hardware store to buy everything needed to change the door locks. He also made a new key for the condo. By noon, he had replaced all the locks. After a quick shower, he grabbed the audio recorder and the printed emails from Stacy's account and headed to her condo to meet Greg's wife. He parked in Stacy's spot and saw a good-looking, dark-haired woman in a Toyota Corolla nearby. He walked over and knocked on her window. She rolled it down and looked at him. "Are you Christy Wilson?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, I am," she replied. "You must be Brad Trevino." "That's right," he said, opening her door. "Come with me, and I'll show you their love nest. You might want to put these on first," he added, handing her a pair of latex gloves. "I don't want to leave any fingerprints." "Good idea," she said. They walked to the condo door, and Brad used his new key to open it. He was relieved when it worked. After disabling the security alarm, they went inside. Brad showed her the bedroom, opening drawers in the closet to reveal Greg's clothes. "Oh my God," Christy said. "I've been searching for some of these things for weeks. I was wondering where his clothes were going. Has your husband been wearing a Rolex watch lately?" Brad asked. Christy nodded. "Yes," she said. "He said it was a gift from management." Brad shook his head and pulled out the card he found in Stacy's nightstand. He opened it and showed it to her. As she read the note, she started crying. "Is that his handwriting?" Brad asked. "Yes," she sobbed. "There's more," Brad said, pulling out the emails and the audio recorder. She read through the emails, tears streaming down her face. Then he played the audio from Friday. "I'm really sorry for all of this," he said, giving her a comforting hug. He felt like crying too, but managed to hold it together. "It's not your fault," she replied. "I had a feeling something was off for a while, but I never had any proof." After she calmed down, she looked at him and asked, "So what are you planning to do?" "I'm going to divorce her," he said. "What about you?" "I'm throwing that scumbag out of the house as soon as I see him," she said. Then she suddenly stopped crying and said, "I've got an idea." "What's that?" he asked. "Since they want to live here together, why don't we help them out?" she suggested. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I'm saying we should pack up their stuff and drop it off here," she explained. Brad thought about it for a moment and smiled. "I like that idea," he said, "but we'd better hurry. They'll be back in a day or two." She shook her head. "Greg said he'd be gone for a week after the convention," she said. "I'm sure Stacy will find a reason to be away too." Brad suddenly remembered the recorded conversation where Stacy had asked if he had everything ready for the following week, but didn't say what it was for. "Damn," he said. "I think you're right. Still, I want to get her stuff out of my house as quickly as possible." "Agreed," she said. "Let's meet back here in about 3 hours?" "Sounds good to me," he said. "I'll just throw her stuff in trash bags and should be able to get back here in 3 hours." "I'll see you then," she said, standing up. Brad took a good look at her. She was shorter than Stacy, with a sweet girl-next-door charm that made her look great. He thought Greg was an idiot to cheat on someone like her. They left the condo and came back about 3 hours later, their cars packed with bags full of their spouse's stuff. They hauled the bags into the condo and dumped them in the almost empty second bedroom, not caring if anything got broken. They knew the cheaters would have to spend hours sorting through everything. "I wasn't exactly gentle with his stuff," she said. "Same here," Brad said with a laugh. They high-fived each other. Brad looked at her and said, "I don't know about you, but I'm starving." "Me too," she said. "I could really go for a big, juicy hamburger." "A thick cheeseburger sounds perfect to me too," he said. "I know a great place. Want to join me?" "It's on me." "Sure, lead the way," she said. He drove to the bar he and Ron often visited, and she followed. When they arrived and Christy saw the front of the building, she asked, "A bar?" "Trust me," he said. "They have the best burgers. You'll love it." "All right," she said. "Just hope you're not planning to get me drunk and take advantage of me." He laughed. "As tempting as that sounds, I wouldn't do that," he said. "Too bad," she said with a laugh. They went inside, ordered beers, burgers, and fries. While eating, they shared stories about their troubled marriages. Her story was somewhat similar to his. They met in college, married soon after, and had different views on having children. She worked in accounts receivable for a home improvement company, while he worked at Acme Real Estate. "Are you a CPA?" he asked. "No, I never went that far, but I hope to someday," she said. He told her about his job and background. "We're always looking for good people," he said. "If you send me a resume, Maybe we can help each other out. I might just do that, Mr. Trevino, she said, taking a bite of her burger. Just then, his phone buzzed. He saw it was Stacy calling, so he answered. Hello? He answered with a neutral tone. Hey, baby, Stacy said. He could tell she was drunk. What are you up to? Just at the bar grabbing a burger, he replied. What's going on with you? Guess what? She said, not waiting for his reply. I won the top seller award. That's great, he said. And they want me to stay in Vegas next week to work with their agents, she continued. He knew this was a lie. Isn't that awesome? They're even talking about promoting me to management soon. He thought to himself, probably on her back. That's fantastic, he said. What about our anniversary? It's coming up this Wednesday. I know, she said. I'm sorry about that. Maybe we can celebrate next weekend instead. Don't worry about it, he said. I know your job is important and I wouldn't want you missing a big sale. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. Nothing, he said. It's just that celebrating 10 years of marriage is special. But I get how much your job matters to you. Don't stress over it. Well, my job is important, but I thought you'd be happy for me, she said. I am, he told her. Go ahead and work with your agents. Don't worry about me. I love you, she said. Okay, he replied. I love you too. Bye. He ended the call and looked at Christy. Well, there it is, he said. Christy shook her head. She's actually picking Greg over our anniversary, she said, placing her hand on his. He almost broke down. Here was someone he barely knew showing more concern than his own wife. What a hoe. I'm sorry. Thanks, he said, trying to smile. He pulled out Jerry's card and dialed his private number. Jerry, the older man answered. This is Brad Trevino. I just heard from Stacy, and she says she's staying in Vegas for another week. And I assume you don't believe her? Jerry asked. Not at all, Brad said. Well, I was just finishing up your report, but I can have my team keep an eye on them and see what they do next, Jerry said. We'll take it from there. I heard the conference wrapped up a few hours ago, and now they're partying hard. Most people are heading home tomorrow. By the way, your wife and her lover spent the night together. I have some video that might interest you. I'll send it to you if you want. It'll be included in my report. That would be great, Jerry, Brad replied. Thanks. He ended the call and looked at Christy. We'll find out tomorrow what's really happening. The two of them spent the night together, and my PI will email me some video footage. Want to watch it with me? Not really, she said, but I feel like I should. He nodded in agreement. All right, let's head to my place, he said, standing up. After paying for their meal, they left the bar and drove to his house. By the time they arrived and got settled in his office, the video had arrived in his email. Would you like something to drink before we start? He asked. Sure, she said. A Coke if you have one. Coming right up, he said, heading to the kitchen. He returned with 2 cold Cokes and handed one to her. He started the video, and they watched as Stacy and Greg undressed and did some crazy things. Both Christy and Brad fought back tears as they saw their spouses together. It was even more crushing to hear the pillow talk afterward. What do you think our spouses are doing right now? Stacy asked. Well, knowing Christy, she's probably watching one of her boring movies, Greg said. Or maybe reading one of her silly books. Yeah, I can see that, Stacy replied. I bet Brad is either working on one of his dumb spreadsheets or going over stock reports. Greg laughed. You'd think he was saving the world or something. His dad's company sells tires, for crying out loud. What's so important about that? So, have you decided what you're going to tell the idiot after the awards banquet tomorrow? Greg asked. Yeah, she said. I'll just tell him I need to stay in Vegas for a week to shadow the sales reps here. He'll buy that. Heck, he'd believe anything I say. I could tell him the moon is made of green cheese, and he'd go for it. And by the time he figures it out, we'll be on the beach in Hawaii, he said. I can't wait to see you in that new sling swimwear you got. Christy lost it. Hawaii, she yelled. That bastard is taking some woman to Hawaii? I'm going to rip his balls off. She looked at Brad. Sorry for calling your wife a hoe. Don't worry about it, he said. I'd have called her the same thing. They turned back to the video. So, Greg continued, what about your anniversary? Are you just going to ignore it? Hawaii sounds way more fun than a night at a steakhouse, she said. I'll make it up to him if I feel like it. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Greg looked at her. You're cold, you know that? He asked. She shrugged. It's just our 10th anniversary, she said. There will be more. Who cares? I need you right now. They continued their love games again, so Brad stopped the video. I've had enough, Brad said. How about you? Christy nodded, tears streaming down her face. More than enough, she said. I'm going to make an appointment on Monday to see a divorce lawyer, he said. Do you want to come with me? Would you mind? She asked softly. Not at all, he said. Christy broke down in tears. Brad held her close, letting her cry on his shoulder. He felt like crying too, but held it in. He comforted her as best as he could while dealing with his own emotions. "Would it be okay if I stayed here with you tonight?" she asked. "No closeness, I just want to be held." "Of course you can stay," he said. "Stay the week if you want." "Thanks," she said. "I can't believe I gave him all those years. I fell for his lies." "I understand completely," Brad said. He took her upstairs to the master bedroom and found an old t-shirt that was long enough for her to sleep in. She took it and went into the bathroom to change. He put on his pajamas and got into bed, waiting for her to return. She came out of the bathroom wearing the long t-shirt, and he was taken aback by how great she looked. He'd always thought Stacy's legs were nice, but Christie's were the best he'd ever seen. She smiled as she slid under the covers. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Haven't you seen nice legs before?" "None as nice as yours," Brad said. "Well, flattery will get you far, mister," she teased. He put his arm around her and pulled her close, enjoying her scent. She draped an arm over his chest and cuddled up to him. "Did you know you're the only woman I've shared a bed with besides my wife in over 10 years? He asked. "And you're the only man I've been with besides my husband," she said. They gazed at each other for what felt like forever. Then Christy leaned in and gave Brad a tender kiss. He kissed her back with a passion he didn't know he had. Realizing where this could lead, he pulled back. He didn't want to do to Stacy what Christy was doing to him. Christy seemed to understand and rested her head on his shoulder without saying a word. They fell asleep like that. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said. "You don't need to get up on my account," she added as he started to get up for the bathroom. "Good morning, beautiful," he replied. "I'll be right back." He went to the bathroom, which was a bit tricky due to his condition. When he came out, Christy had already started breakfast, cooking bacon and eggs. He glanced at the clock and saw it was 8:30 a.m. His focus shifted back to Christy. He enjoyed watching her cook in his old t-shirt, which briefly reminded him of better times when Stacy used to make breakfast for them every morning. "Wow, that smells amazing," he said. "I hope it's okay that I'm using your kitchen," she said. "Not at all," he replied. "I can't even remember the last time someone cooked breakfast for me." "Stacy never made you breakfast?" she asked. "She did at first," he said. "But she stopped a long time ago. She said it took too much time and she needed to look presentable for her clients." "What a hoe," Christy muttered. "I agree," he said. He breathed in the aroma of the bacon as she set a big plate in front of him. He ate the food eagerly, like he hadn't had a proper meal in ages. "That was fantastic. Do you cook like this every morning?" "Whenever I can," she said. Brad's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and saw it was Jerry calling, so he answered. "Morning, Jerry," he said. "You're working on Sundays now?" "More than I'd like," Jerry laughed. "Just wanted to update you. Your wife and her lover caught their flight from Las Vegas just before 6 o'clock this morning. They had a 40-minute layover at LAX and left there about an hour ago. They should land in Honolulu in roughly 5 hours. I can give you the flight details if you want." "I'd appreciate that," Brad said. "They're on American Airlines Flight 31, Jerry said. "I have someone in Honolulu ready to track them when they arrive." "Thanks, Jerry," Brad said, noting the information. He ended the call and turned back to Christy. "Well," he said, "it's happening. They're on their way to Hawaii." Stacy settled into her seat after the plane took off. As she looked out the window, she watched the plane heading over the Pacific Ocean. This is it, she thought. She glanced to her left and saw Greg already fast asleep in the seat beside her. Closing her eyes, she briefly reflected on the past decade. For a moment, she felt a twinge of guilt about what she was doing to her husband, who had trusted her completely. Deep down, she knew this was just another in a series of poor choices she'd made. But she told herself she deserved this. Eventually, she thought, Brad would never find out. Her marriage would continue, and they would eventually retire and grow old together. Her first mistake was telling Brad she couldn't get pregnant. In reality, she could, but she didn't want the responsibility of children. Motherhood might suit others, but not her. So, she claimed a medical issue had led to her getting her tubes tied. Brad believed her and accepted it. However, she had issues with the IUD and had to stop using it. The pelvic pain and headaches became unbearable, so she switched to regular birth control pills. She also began using the calendar method to avoid closeness on her most fertile days. It worked most of the time, but she still ended up pregnant twice. The first time was with her husband, afraid of how he'd react to the pregnancy, which would reveal her earlier lie, and wanting to stay childless, she quietly arranged for an abortion, paying for it with her own money. Luckily, they had separate personal accounts in addition to a joint one. They had agreed to deposit 10% of their net income into the joint account, but she often misreported her contributions. She could cover the abortion costs herself, keeping Brad in the dark. Her second pregnancy happened with Greg about 6 months ago. She told him about it and decided to have another abortion, once again using her own funds. She hoped Brad would never learn about this. Then there were her affairs. She stayed faithful to Brad for the first 7 years of their marriage, but everything changed one day when she was out with a client who was both handsome and wealthy. It was a spontaneous choice, but one she didn't really regret. They had an intense, passionate encounter in the master bedroom of the house she was showing, and he bought the house on the spot as a thank you. She didn't do this often, maybe 10 times over the next year and a half, but she later found out that others had done similar things. Sure, she felt a bit guilty, but she thought, why not? If other women could get away with it, so could she. In her mind, it didn't impact Brad. She still loved him, and what he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Then she met Greg, and everything changed. He was everything Brad wasn't. While Brad liked to carefully analyze every decision, Greg was spontaneous and made quick choices. Brad's life and career path had been set long ago. He had worked for his father all his life and would soon become the CFO of his father's tire company, eventually taking over as president and CEO. Greg, on the other hand, didn't plan far ahead and lived day by day. While Brad focused on the future, Greg enjoyed the present. They were also quite different in bed. Brad made love to her with attention to her pleasure, while Greg was more about quick, straightforward act. At first, they met up at motels and hotels around town or at a house they had on the market. But she started worrying that someone might see them and tell either Brad or Greg's wife, Christy. Then, one night, Brad said he was worried they were growing apart. That freaked her out, so she put things on hold with Greg for a while and focused all her attention on Brad. But that didn't last long. Greg wanted to get things going again, but she was scared that Brad might find out. She needed a plan, so she decided to buy her own condo. This way, she'd have a private spot for her and Greg. Greg wanted to get intimate in the bed she shared with Brad, but she nixed that idea. Even though she thought Brad was a bit boring, she still had some feelings for him. It also helped that she and Brad had long ago decided to file separate tax returns. This way, she could keep the condo secret while benefiting from the tax break. It seemed like a perfect solution. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. This led to her latest plan, spending a week in Hawaii with Greg. She took a week off from work, telling her office she was going to Hawaii with Brad after the big corporate event. Meanwhile, Greg told his wife he'd be traveling for work, which wasn't unusual for him. She lied to Brad, saying she'd be in Vegas for the week. Of course, a couple of phone calls could reveal the truth, but she figured Brad would believe whatever she said. The only downside was missing their 10th anniversary, but she promised herself she'd make it up to him when she got back, and she intended to keep all this a secret. She gazed at the blue water below, a smile on her face as she daydreamed about Hawaii. Greg had bought her a daring, open sling swimwear for their trip. He was eager to watch her take it off and pleasure herself on the beach. The thought made her feel aroused, and she had to fight the urge to touch herself right there. Maybe she'd find a chance to do it in the restroom later, she thought. She took out her phone to check for messages or missed calls. She wasn't surprised that Brad hadn't reached out. He wasn't big on texting and preferred to communicate by phone or face-to-face. She laughed to herself. The plane shuddered, and she thought they might be hitting turbulence. Then she noticed the plane starting to descend, and the engine sounded strange. Looking out the window, she realized something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the cabin was chaotic, and she felt the force of gravity pressing her into her seat. Outside, she saw they were plummeting rapidly. "Oh my God," she thought. "This is it. We're crashing. I'm going to die." Oxygen masks dropped down, and she heard other passengers, including Greg, screaming while the flight attendants tried to get everyone ready for the worst. With tears streaming down her face, she looked at her phone and made one final decision. Brad and Christy had just wrapped up breakfast and cleaned up the last of the dishes. They sat back at the table to plan how to handle their cheating partners. Brad was struck by how sharp Christy was at figuring things out. Right now, he felt closer to her than he had to Stacy in a long time. He had just come back with a second cup of coffee for them when his phone buzzed. Seeing Stacy's name, he put the call on speaker. "Hello," he said. "Brad?" Stacy's voice was frantic, but there was a lot of noise and shouting in the background. "What's going on, Stacy?" he asked. "Not time. Plane. Down. So sorry. Forgive. Her voice cut off suddenly. Brad and Christy looked at each other, stunned. He tried to call Stacy back, but it went straight to voicemail. He turned to Christy. "Try Greg," he said. Christy rushed to the front room, pulled her phone from her purse, and tried calling. She shook her head. "It went straight to voicemail," she reported. Brad went to his home office, fired up his computer, and looked up the airline's contact number. After some back and forth, he finally reached someone who confirmed they were investigating reports of a crash. He left his contact information, along with Stacy's and Greg's details, and was told someone would get back to him. He also gave Christy's info so they could reach her too. He did a quick Google search but found nothing yet. He figured it would be at least an hour before any news would come in. They went to the front room and turned on the TV, hoping for updates. Brad flipped through the channels but found no reports. He looked at his phone, reflecting on the events that led to this moment. At last, a news network announced that an American Airlines flight bound for Honolulu had crashed into the Pacific, but no further details were available. Christy gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Brad embraced her, silently hoping Stacy was still alive. Although he resented what Stacy had done to their marriage, he didn't want her to die. After an hour, his phone rang. Lowering the volume on the TV, he picked up. "Mr. Trevino?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is him," Brad replied. "I wanted to let you know that your wife's flight has indeed crashed," she said. "We don't have additional details right now, but we'll update you as soon as we have more information." "Thanks," Brad said, and ended the call. He and Christy shared a hug and a few tears. Shortly after, Christy received a call with the same update. Later, his father called, which wasn't surprising given that his parents often reached out when they heard news like this. "Hey, Brad," his father greeted. "Hi, Dad. How's everything?" Brad asked. "Just got back from church. Did you catch the news about the crash?" his father inquired. "Yeah, I saw it," Brad responded. "That's awful," his father said. "By the way, how's Stacy? Isn't she coming back from Vegas?" "She's actually not doing well, Dad," Brad replied. "She was on the flight that crashed." "What?" his father exclaimed, clearly stunned. "Why was she going to Hawaii without you?" "She was with her boyfriend," Brad explained. "Oh my God," his father said. "I'm so sorry, son. Take the week off to handle everything. I'll inform Mike. If you need anything, just let us know, all right?" "Thanks, Dad," Brad said, ending the call. His mind was racing with mixed feelings. He felt sorrowful that Stacy was probably dead, yet he was angry with her for cheating. Frustration also boiled inside him for not confronting her sooner. Oddly, the fact that her death meant no divorce didn't bother him. Then another thought struck him. He would have to manage all her final expenses, including the condo. Great, he thought to himself. He turned to Christy, wondering how she'd handle everything. What would she do now? An idea came to him, and he approached her. "Christy," he said, "how about selling your place and moving in here with me?" She looked up, her eyes filling with tears. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Yes, I am," he confirmed. "I've got an extra bedroom upstairs, and you'll have a lot to handle in the coming months. Maybe we can support each other through this." She thought for a moment before responding. "Okay," she said, "but only if one thing is agreed upon." "What's that?" he asked. "You let me sleep with you," she said. "Really?" Brad asked. This was moving faster than he had expected, and he wondered if it was wise. He pushed that thought aside and decided to take a chance. "Yes," she replied. "I haven't had the comfort of a husband in quite a while. Last night was the first time I felt at ease in a long time. Is that all right with you?" "It's more than all right," he assured her. "Great," she said. "I'll head back to my place, grab my stuff, and come over tonight." Brad gave a nod. "I'll be here," he said. Once she left, he called Lucy, who managed the office where Stacy usually worked. "Hello," Lucy answered her cell. "This is Brad Trevino," he said. "Oh, hi, Brad," Lucy responded. "How's Hawaii?" "I wouldn't know," he said. "I've heard it's nice this time of year. Why do you ask?" "Stacy mentioned you two were heading there after the company meeting," Lucy said. "I figured you were on your way." "No," Brad corrected her. "She was heading to Hawaii, but not with me. She left with Greg." "What?" Lucy said, sounding astonished. "Yes," Brad confirmed. "But neither of them made it. Their plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean earlier today. You might have seen it on the news." "Oh no," Lucy said. "Do you know if they survived?" "I doubt either of them survived the crash," he said. "I'm so sorry," Lucy said. "Please accept my condolences. Thank you for informing me. By the way, the company provides life insurance for all employees." I'll start the paperwork first thing in the morning, but I'll need some documentation from the airline. Can you get that for me? Yes, I'll get what I can, he replied. But I have a question for you. What is it? Lucy asked. Did you know Stacy was having an affair with Greg? He inquired. I had a hunch something was going on, Lucy said. There were some rumors, but nothing concrete. We generally don't gossip about things like that at the office. Got it, he said. That's all I needed. I'll be in touch. Thanks, Lucy said. And once more, my condolences. Thank you, Brad said, ending the call. Later that night, while he and Christy were watching TV, a news segment about the crash came on. The report revealed that a crew member from a nearby freighter had captured the plane's final moments on video. The footage, which was shown on the network, clearly displayed the plane plunging rapidly, nose first. It appeared as if the plane crumpled when it hit the water. The report mentioned that the freighter had altered its course to search for survivors. Although they recovered several bodies from the water, there were no survivors. They also retrieved a lot of luggage, including items belonging to Stacy and Greg. Unfortunately, neither Stacy's nor Greg's bodies were found. The following months were chaotic for both Brad and Christy. She moved in with him and sold her house. Brad had a lot on his plate, including dealing with Stacy's condo. Since there was nothing in it he wanted, he donated everything to Goodwill, which gladly accepted it. Eventually, he sold the condo and recouped the amount Stacy had originally paid for it. Insurance payments of $500,000 from Acme Real Estate arrived for both Brad and Christy, compensating them for their spouses' deaths. Christy moved in with Brad, and they quickly set about removing all reminders of Stacy. They took down photos, removed knickknacks, and replaced furniture, especially the bed. Brad allowed family members to take anything they wanted. Everything else, including the 2 cars, was either sold, burned, donated to Goodwill, or discarded. Resolving Stacy's bank accounts proved to be a lengthy process. After several months and a mountain of paperwork, Brad managed to secure a check for approximately $250,000. Lawyers approached both Brad and Christy, eager to benefit from the crash. An investigation later revealed that the flight crew had misinterpreted warnings from the plane's computer and took incorrect actions. The aircraft descended at a rate of about 12,000 feet per minute and hit the water at around 135 miles per hour. It took just over 3 minutes for the plane to crash into the ocean. Brad thought about Stacy's final moments, some of which she spent on the phone with him. It must have been terrifying for her, realizing she was falling to her death with no chance of escape. Despite her last-minute regret, he felt it was too little, too late. Luckily, the airline agreed to a settlement with all the families affected, giving just over $175,000 to each passenger's family. After everything was settled, Brad and Christy ended up with a total of over $1.6 million. Though taxes took a chunk, they still walked away with a substantial amount. Because Stacy's and Greg's bodies were never found, there wasn't a need for a funeral. Instead, Brad and Christy organized memorial services for their families. They didn't cry over their lost spouses. 3 months later, Christy left her job to start working for Brad, and their love had grown stronger. During a dinner at a local Texas roadhouse, Brad proposed to Christy, kneeling on one knee. Her joyful scream was met with applause from the diners around them. She whispered to him that he had finally decided to make an honest woman out of her. Brad, curious, asked why she thought that. Christy told him it was because he was going to be a daddy, and he responded by showering her with kisses. Brad expressed his deep love for her, and she replied that she loved him even more. Then she mentioned that there was one thing she needed to ask. When Brad inquired what it was, Christy requested that he not make her fly anywhere. Brad laughed and hugged her tightly, reassuring her that she had nothing to worry about.